Hello and welcome to the BloodStream podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and BloodStream Media, and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I'm your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any of those treatment decisions.
On today's show, Barb and Jeff are back, this time with an interview of Gary McClain, a therapist who's worked extensively with the rare disease community and has some books that Jeff and Barb are going to be talking to Gary about. We've also got the latest on our I'm Fine segment, this one featuring Cassie Miller, a parent raising two daughters with von Willebrand disease whose experiences have taken very different paths. We have got all of that and more on today's episode. Welcome to BloodStream.
Listeners, as always, thank you for joining us today. And if you like what you hear, please share this episode with your friends, with your family, on social media. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the BloodStream podcast so you can get these suckers right in your podcast player whenever they go live.
I also want to remind you, dear listeners, that the BloodStream podcast is indeed made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Yes, that's right, Takeda. Takeda has got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda, Amy Board, believes in a world free of bleeds.
Which is great. I love it. What a vibe.
What a vibe. And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. You can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, that's bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the BloodStream podcast, I would just like to say thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, Takeda.
All right, Amy Board.
PJL, here we are. Where are you? You're obviously not with me in studio. Where are you, good sir? Where are you?
I'll give you a hint.
Oh?
I'm wearing a cap with that location on it. Does that help?
Duh. You're in New York, son.
I am in New York.
You're in your homeland.
I'm in the homeland, soaking up all of the post-championship vibes, wearing the gear, high-fiving strangers in T-shirts that say Knicks on it. It's great.
Amazing. How does it feel? This has been a long time coming, as Taylor's Allison Swift we used to say.
Who was just wedded
wedded in your state. Yep.
So there is that. Yeah, I know it's been about a month since the Knicks won the championship, but I'm ready to talk about it now.
Okay.
And I was thinking about the podcast today, thinking about like, why does a sports championship mean anything to me as an adult? Like, what does it really matter? For me, the last 2-3 months have brought out this little 9-year-old boy who first fell in love with basketball and with sports, but couldn't play. And so for me, basketball was this thing I aspired to be a part of, that I connected with through characters on television, but always felt far away. Add to that the fact that my team came close and lost in such painstaking fashion in the 90s. In fact, Amy, I have here a little prop. It says, "Let's go," and then the emblem for the Knicks, for those who can't see this.
Sure.
And then down here, it says 94. Do you know where I made this?
Where?
I made this at the Hole in the Wall Gang camp in Connecticut, my first year attending camp for a kid with a bleeding disorder. And it was during the NBA Finals. And I wanted to watch Game 7. Day one at camp, I'm up in the counselors' faces. Can I watch Game 7? Game 7. And they're like, there's no TVs, there's no technology. You're at camp. And I was really unhappy with that. So some clever counselor came up with this idea. He said, when you go to bed tonight, above the fireplace, we'll put the plaque that you made in wood shop. I made this in the wood shop when I was 9 years old. Mm-hmm. And then I colored it when I was 9 years old. All of this was done when I was 9. I don't want you, Amy, thinking this is my current talent.
Actually, it's pretty great for 9. Pretty great for 9. I've seen a lot of 9 art, and that's pretty great for 9.
Could be worse. And he said, put it on the fireplace. And if the Knicks win the championship, I'll leave it with the logo out. So when you wake up in the morning, you'll know they won. And if they lose, I'll leave it on the mantle, flipped around. And when you wake up, you'll know they lost.
Oh, my God.
So I woke up that morning at camp with one thing on my mind, flew out of bed, stared up at the wall, and I saw this, the blank back of my Knicks plaque. And I knew the New York Knicks had lost the NBA championship. And that was the closest they came in 1994 until this year in 2026. So I feel a renewed connection to that 9-year-old who had some sense of this will matter in my life. Yeah. This will do something for me. You know, now at this stage of life, I know like it doesn't really change my life. It doesn't really do anything for me. But the 9-year-old inside of me feels seen and recognized and celebrated and a part of something. So yeah, it's exciting. It's fun for all the superficial reasons. But I guess I wanted to share on the podcast that I have been exploring why this matters to me on a deeper level. Yeah. And it's absolutely interconnected with living with hemophilia, not being able to play basketball as a kid, falling in love with it from afar, developing this fandom. My first love was the Knicks, with all due respect to Natalie and Vivian. My first love was the Knicks. And now in 2026, at age 40, they've paid something off that for me started when I was 9. And I'm quite happy about that.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. There's a piece of me that thinks it was so good and formative to like have that disappointing experience. I'm also really glad they didn't win in 94, so you would miss that moment. You know, it's such a delicious moment, those like last seconds of, you know, championship games like that. Like they're just, regardless of what the score is, they're just delicious if it's your team and if you've been in the hunt for so long, which the Knicks really have. Like what a story, what a storied franchise, down and out franchise. Like people are like just, it was great for non-Knicks fans. It was great for non-basketball fans. It's like, it was great. Those types of stories are fun and great. And like the nation was with y'all. That was cool.
Yeah, it was a fun time. So thanks for indulging me as we chatted a little basketball. Yeah. I promise I'm not going to wear Knicks paraphernalia and talk about the NBA all throughout the year, but I may talk about it a little bit more.
I was just about to say, I was like, don't make promises you can't keep.
I left some wiggle room. Wiggle room.
You did. You left great wiggle room.
All right. Well, with that, let's move on to this episode's segment of I'm Fine, in which I'm going to talk with Cassie Miller, who's a parent raising 2 daughters with von Willebrand disease, and they have very different lived experiences. So Cassie shares how she's learned to quiet the panic, stay focused on solutions, and advocate when something doesn't feel right. This is a conversation about resilience, trusting your instincts, and finding the courage to say, I'm scared, so that you can keep moving forward.
Oh, that sounds so good. Y'all, as a reminder, I'm Fine aims to challenge entrenched ideas around chronic resiliency and satisfaction with suboptimal outcomes by inspiring people with hemophilia to seek education and truly consider the possibilities. Sanofi seeks to expand the idea of what's possible for the hemophilia community. Take a deeper look at the science behind hemophilia and an important connection between factor activity levels and potential activities at levelsmatter.com. Now on to the next segment of I'm Fine.
Sometimes I'm fine means exactly what it sounds like. But sometimes I'm fine means I'm overwhelmed. I'm scared. I don't even know where to begin. For parents raising children with bleeding disorders, there often isn't room to fall apart in the middle of the moment. There's a problem that needs solving, a doctor to call, a treatment plan to figure out. Someone has to stay steady. Our guest today is Cassie Miller. She's raising 2 daughters with von Willebrand disease. One has had a fairly, we'll call it, typical experience. The other has faced surgeries, joint bleeds, additional diagnoses, and years of unanswered questions.
I have 2 daughters. My oldest is Naomi, and she is a very typical von Willebrand's patient. She hasn't had very many complications with her bleeding disorder. And then on the other hand, we have my youngest, her name is Julie, and she is not the typical von Willebrand's kid. She is now on Prophy, which is not very common with von Willebrand's, and that's been amazingly helpful. She's ended up having multiple surgeries, and she doesn't heal as well after the surgeries and just tends to have a lot of complications due to her bleeding disorder. Our journey with that started because the girls were getting a lot of bruises, and they were in foster care at the time, and their foster parents got accused of abusing them because of all the bruises. And they knew that that was not the issue, and so they started searching for why these kids were constantly covered in bruises. And that's where they found the diagnosis for von Willebrand's. I found out about it because this is all during the process in which I was adopting them. And I never expected it to be what it ended up being. I expected a couple of bleeding issues every once in a while, and otherwise for it to be fairly normal from what had read about it. And it's been anything but.
As Julie's medical needs became more complex, Cassie responded the way she always had. She started looking for answers, looking for solutions, and pushing fear aside until there was time to deal with it.
When I don't know what to do, I tend to sit down and I look at facts. Okay, there's a problem. What is the solution? How do I figure this out? And I don't tend to panic until it's over. Julie was actually just given a diagnosis of a hypermobility thing with Ehlers-Danlos, which has affected her bleeding disorder as well. I think when getting that diagnosis, it was less about fear and more about relief, because it gave us a reason why hers is so much different. Everything is always fine, but it's not, you know, and you tend to say that more to the people who don't really understand. But if you go talk to somebody in the community who also has a child with a bleeding disorder, you can really tell them what is going on and how you're feeling about it, because they tend to understand more of what is going on.
Everything is always fine, but it's not. That tension sits at the center of this conversation. Keeping things together can help you get through the moment, but eventually, whatever you're carrying has to find a way out.
So recently we've had a lot of medical things going on with Julie. And in the moment, I chose to close it in. Julie's having some major GI issues. We went in to see one of her physicians about it. And they said, oh, look, this image is looking okay. So it's doing all right. So we'll see you again in a year. And I left that visit feeling fear because we could not continue what we were doing. I left that visit with the I'm fine attitude, and I went home and I did my very best writing at 1:00 in the morning after you can't sleep at all. And I wrote a 4-page letter to the doctor detailing why this was not okay and why this wasn't fine. I sent that to them and it changed a lot of things. Julie's doing much better now, and was the catalyst that actually got her the EDS diagnosis, and they listen. Sometimes if you can't say it in the moment, go home, process it, and turn it back in. It can make a difference. You do need to say what needs to be said, even if you can't tell it to their face. Write it out, send it to them. They'll read it.
Speaking up doesn't always have to happen in the moment. For Cassie, advocacy looked like taking the time to process what had happened, putting it into words, and coming back with clarity. It's an approach she's also tried to pass along to both of her girls.
Well, one thing I've always told them is don't react in the moment. And that's one thing I try to live by, because if you react instant with the emotion, most of the time you are not going to accomplish what you want, because you can't have it all driven on emotion. Sometimes you have to be able to step back, allow yourself to process that emotion, but then take what that emotion is getting and pull the objective parts out of it, what needs to happen, so that you can tell them everything. Julie especially has done really well with this. She has very much gotten into advocacy. She has now gone to the Capitol Advocacy Days for 4 years. Last year, she actually did some speaking there. I was really proud of her for that. She was advocating for someone else. She has taken it to heart, and she's very quiet, especially for appointments. But when it comes to speaking out for others, she's really done well.
Fear and anxiety still pop up, but it's how we manage and how we teach others to do so.
I hope that one day they can learn to not allow that fear to control them. You're allowed to have your moment, but then take that moment, process it, and find a way beyond it. Don't live in the fear. It doesn't do any good. I think a lot of times it's, I'm not okay right now, but I'm going to be. I'm fine means that even if things are not going perfect, we will figure out a way to make it better.
Fear isn't really what Cassie's challenging. It's pretending we're okay when someone we trust is genuinely asking. For her, honesty begins with knowing who can hold the real answer.
Everybody has the stigma that people will ask you how you're doing, and everybody says, "Oh, I'm doing great, I'm doing fine." Everybody feels like nobody really wants to hear what's going on. But that's not always true. Yes, if I am passing a random person in public and they ask how you're doing, I'm going to always say, "Yeah, I'm doing great, I'm doing fine." But if you know the person and they're asking you, if they're honestly asking, you need to give an honest answer back.
I'm not okay right now, but I'm going to be. Maybe I'm fine isn't something that we need to stop saying. Maybe we just need a few people in our lives who know to ask one more question, or who know what I'm fine really means. Let's figure out a way to get through this together. Thanks to Cassie Miller for sharing her story today. And thank you for listening to another episode of I'm Fine, a storytelling series from BloodStream that explores what it means to say I'm fine, one episode at a time. I'm Patrick James Lynch. We'll see you next time.
Patrick, thank you. Cassie, thank you. And Hannah Berry, also thank you for helping write and produce this segment. Again, y'all, Sanofi aims to raise the bar for patients living with hemophilia. Reimagine what's possible by visiting rareblood.disorders.com to hear more about Sanofi's dedication to the bleeding disorder community. PJL, what's next?
Well, our final segment for today features our friends Jeff and Barb, this
Yes.
time in conversation with therapist Gary McClain. Gary has extensive experience in rare disease communities and is a published author who's on today to talk with Jeff and Barb about his experience in rare disease communities and some of that work he has published. Let's take a listen.
Welcome everyone. It's Barb and Jeff, the Barb and Jeff show. Not quite as good as the Amy and Patrick James show, but we're not that far behind. This is our fourth podcast, and they haven't fired us yet. Except I don't think you can fire people who are volunteering, right, Jeff?
I think that's true.
We're grateful that you all tuned in to our podcast again. We have a very special guest today, but before we get to him, I would really like to just have Jeffrey introduce himself. And for those of you who do not know, we consider each other AEs, and I'll let him tell you why.
Well, thanks, Barb. Yes, we do consider ourselves AEs. My story begins in the 1950s. I was born with hemophilia, severe A. And at that time, plasma was the only way of stopping bleeding, which was pretty inadequate. Ended up with a lot of joint bleeds and, long-term joint problems. Factor came out in about 1967. And then, unfortunately, the 1980s came and AIDS came, HIV AIDS. So I decided not to take Factor for 2 years. That saved me from not getting AIDS, but it made my joints even worse than they were before. That was kind of a bargain with the devil, I suppose. But the one thing I did get, unfortunately, was hepatitis C. And hepatitis C was also a lot of people in the community had one or the other or both. But I just had hepatitis C, and in 20 years, 2005, my liver totally failed, and I was saved with a liver transplant at UCLA, which happens to be my alma mater, by the way. And after a long recovery, over a year, I joined the Committee of 10,000, which was a nonprofit group that advocated for people with hemophilia and AIDS, and I worked with them for 8 years. Yeah, I met Barb almost 2 years ago. In August, it'll be 2 years. And I met her on an HFA call. We hit it off right away, and we've worked together now for almost 2 years and doing podcasts. And Barb has an amazing story, so I'm going to turn it over to Barb.
So my name is Barb Force, and I was born in 1951. That's hard to believe. I was calculating, Jeffrey, between us, we have 145 years of being in the bleeding disorders community.
You're making me feel very old.
What? Yeah, well, I'm still older. I'm still the big sister. That's when I was born. not only was the condition I ended up being diagnosed with not even discovered until 1956, there was no thought that any woman, any girl could be a bleeder. Now, that was the beginning of a 47-year journey to get a diagnosis. And finally, in 1998, I was diagnosed with severe factor VII deficiency. It's an ultra rare bleeding disorder, but it's very, very similar to all of the other factor deficiencies. But that aside, I started a group for women with ladybugs called women with bleeding disorders, called Ladybugs. Here's my mug. Thanks to the Chest Foundation, which has sponsored us for, 12, 13, 14 years now. And it's the only national annual occurring program for all women and girls with bleeding disorders. So I'm very proud of that. And so long as I'm upright and breathing, I'm going to try to keep on it. In the meantime, I want to let you know about Dr. Gary McClain. And while I don't call him a close personal friend, and I'm not one of his patients, I consider him a friend. We're board members for the Chest Foundation. I have not only been instrumental in hoping that he will do presentations at some of our conferences, but I've sat in on many, and there's so much I've learned, I can't even go on. Dr. McClain, would you please introduce yourself? Because your paragraph of who you are and what you've done is way more. So maybe hit the highlights, and then I have a question for you afterwards.
Sure. Yeah. I have been a mental health provider for a long time, and I'm a therapist. And many years ago, I used to do market research focus groups for the medical industry, treatment centers, pharma companies. And I just got really, really interested in mental health as it relates to chronic and catastrophic health conditions. And what I was finding is that I was interviewing people. For example, I worked for a large cancer center, and people would wait for me after the interview, and they would say, "Thank you so much for talking to me. No one ever asked me about my emotions. My doctors don't, my families don't want to talk about it. So thank you for asking me how I feel emotionally." And I started hearing this a lot, and I thought, I think I have a calling, and I think it's time to get back into mental health. So I got my license in 2005, about 20 years ago, and got back into mental health and with the focus on health-related issues. And I created a website, just got diagnosed, and I've been doing a lot of writing, and I got connected with the hemophilia community very quickly. I wrote an article quite a few years ago about Hep C and HIV. And I got a call from somebody who ran a hemophilia chapter in Colorado, and called me and said, "I read your article, and can we reprint it in our newsletter?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. But what does hemophilia have to do with HIV?" And he said, "I think I need to educate you." And I said, "Yeah, I think you do. I had no idea there was a connection." And so we had a nice discussion, and then I published with him, and then I got involved with chess, and just kind of snowballed from there. So I got connected through the hemophilia community, starting with HIV, and then found my way into doing other things. So it's been a great experience. I feel like the bleeding disorder community is a home for me. I really appreciated the opportunities that I've had.
It certainly is. We welcome you with open arms anytime you're around. And I should let the audience know, too, that after Dr. McClain has done a presentation, it is not unusual to find him sitting around the room with people coming up and asking them questions. And it's all about our mental health. Like, nobody ever asks anybody, how do you feel up here? It's just, where are you bleeding? Where's your bruises? Where's your joint problems? Blah, blah, blah. And you've done that. And especially your book, Just Got Diagnosed, was really a really good, informative book. I definitely think that anybody who hasn't read it should order it. And it's also bringing up your recent book, The Power of Closure, Why We Want It, How to Get It, and When to Walk Away. That's a statement that's just so powerful, because it's not just about the bleeding disorders community. It's about the world. Everybody wants closure. Dr. McClain, can you elaborate on that?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. One of the topics that comes up so often in working with clients over the years is the aspect of how do I get closure, that whole topic, whether it's breakups, whether it's a death, whether it's a professional relationship that didn't go well. And so I think, to me, closure just means tying up loose ends in communication. And I think it's a basic human need that we tie up these loose ends when we're communicating, and it just comes up so often. And I think what I write a lot about in my book is not only why we want closure, for the many reasons why we want closure, hurt feelings and anger and just feeling like something needed to be said that wasn't said, and how to do that. But also there are times when we just have to let go. And as I often tell someone, say to a client, is sometimes the only closure you can have is accepting that there's no closure and being able to walk away. We don't always get the closure that we want. Just bring up an example, a beloved professional, a physician moves on. They move to a different treatment center. They move on. And I've so often had clients say, I want closure with that person. How do I didn't get to say goodbye, or I had an appointment and it didn't go well. I didn't feel like I was being heard. How do I get closure? What can I do about that? So I think in professional and health situations, in any situation, that need to communicate, that need to tie up loose ends, I think is such a basic human need that can cause us so much frustration.
What can you tell us about some of the ideas and chapters in your book for people in the bleeding disorders community just got diagnosed? Whether your parents are dealing with a child that's just been diagnosed, whether as a woman you were diagnosed probably as a teen or later. What's relevant in there for us?
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind. One is information is power and support is power. And I think I've even sat next to clients who were just so afraid to learn about their diagnosis. And I've said, let's go to a reliable, trustworthy website and let's do some exploring together. Would you like to do that? Because it can be scary. Getting information, can be scary, but I think information is power. Knowing what you're up against is the starting point to taking care of yourself and knowing what you need to do. So I think just getting information, being informed, not overloading, not being buried in information and fear, but to get information and gradually in your time and to be informed, I think so important. I say flood the fear with facts. When you start to have that fear, say, okay, what are the facts here? What do I need to be thinking about? What treatments do I need to be looking at? What treatments am I undergoing? And to know that and to be able to be knowledgeable. I think I've heard that I didn't make this up, but be the CEO of your own healthcare. And I think information is really important, and having people around you support is also really important. And I think, to be very honest with you, I have really learned the value of support by working with the bleeding disorder community. It's such a connected community that people really care about each other, and they share information and they share each other's burdens. And you go to a chess, for example, or a ladybugs meeting, and you're surrounded by people who get it. Said, I get it. I've been through it. I get it. here's an idea.
That's huge.
Huge, huge, huge.
For me, being able to share that way at my very first National Hemophilia Conference, when very few women were around, they had a breakout session for women. I heard a woman who was a nurse. Unfortunately, she also had a bleeding disorder, kind of severe von Willebrand's disease. But she spoke, and she's passed away since. She spoke about everything that I had lived up to that point. And I burst into tears at the end and went up to her, hugged her, was crying. I have seen this since at Ladybug's conferences. You probably have too, where first time attendees, somebody gets it. And it's that validation that you don't even have to say anything. They know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing that we do share in this community. And one reason it is kind of unique as connected disease communities go, we are rare in the world of medical conditions. And we're trying now, Jeffrey and I, who I think has had to bow off a little bit because he's had some technical difficulties. Jeffrey has really worked hard with me to connect the men with bleeding disorders, primarily hemophilia, with the women, because we learn so much from what they have gone through before us.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard because we've been so disparate for so long, and it's the men with hemophilia and the girls, the females, the women here. And really, when we bleed, we have the same bleeds. We really do. And we have the same concerns. And joining hands together to join on the Hill is what we're hoping to get active through some coalitions that have been kind of like this in forming. You know, there's been a lot of talk about getting a national coalition to go to the Hill and tell the Congress people what we need in the way of funding, in the way of financing. For instance, grants have been halved. Donations are not forthcoming for a lot of these programs. And we need to do something about it. We need maybe Congress to intercede and say, look, we didn't realize this was that big of a problem with women. You know, it's a real problem that we need to get some action on this. And I would encourage any of the viewers in this podcast that we're doing to reach out to Believe Limited. They'll be happy to put you in contact with myself and Jeffrey, and maybe we can help make this work. What do you think?
Absolutely. Again, that's the power of support. People bonding together and creating good together.
Without a doubt. Well, Dr. McClain, you have created much good in my world, in the world of all the people that I've been fortunate to be associated with. And as long as I'm upright and breathing, I want you on my team, okay?
Thank you. I'm here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Dr. McClain, for all of your input. And please, folks, if you get a chance, Dr. Gary McClain, his books Just Got Diagnosed, and also Closure, The Power of Closure. Thank you, lovely audience, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Well, thanks again, Jeff, Barb, and Gary for that excellent conversation. And thank you to Cassie for joining the program in today's I'm Fine segment. Thanks as always to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Remember, bleedingdisorders.com for more. And to Sanofi for supporting the I'm Fine segment. Visit levelsmatter.com for more there. We could not produce this show without their support, and we are grateful for it. Okay, Bordeaux, next episode comes out July the 24th. What can the listeners expect to hear?
We have a very important figure in our bleeding disorder community on the show, July 24th. Jonathan James, who is from Hope Charities, who runs Hope Charities, founded Hope Charities, has an in-depth conversation with you. And we really get to hear his backstory. And the organization is really, really, really doing well. And what a gap it's filling in today's bleeding disorder space. And so I'm really excited for you all to hear the conversation between Patrick and Jonathan. So it will be one that you don't want to miss.
Yes, it was a rare treat being able to spend such time with Jonathan in studio. Going through his story. I learned a lot that I didn't know, and I've known Jonathan decently well now for over a decade. So I hope you listeners will enjoy it. That comes out on July 24th. And with that, that is all for this episode. Remember to subscribe to have that July 24th episode delivered to you the moment it goes live.
And as always, email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com to inquire about podcast or video or film casting opportunities, also to get your story out there, or maybe even suggest a topic or a guest. We would love to hear from you. You can find me and Patrick on social media, as well as Bloodstream Media and Blood Believe Limited. All the things. We're on literally everywhere.
There's just so many. There's so many options for you.
Yeah.
We're drowning in options.
We're drowning in options, folks.
I'm your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your other host, Amy Board.
And until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, y'all.